Hi, Linda.
Hi, here we are in Montreal, Quebec.
What are you doing here? You got me.
Got me. We're here for a family reunion, and
Nice.
thank goodness we made it.
Nice, easy trip.
Great trip, just because we didn't bring any proof of citizenship and they didn't ask.
They'll let us back.
They let us in.
Well, I love you.
I love you too.
Bye. In Montreal, from our hotel. This is Montreal on a hazy, rainy morning. It's Olympic Stadium. The storm. Hello, Linda Russo.
Yeah.
You having a good time in Montreal?
Yeah.
You know what I think?
What?
Glad you climbed up here?
Yeah. And I huffed and I puffed.
Well, where are we going now, lady?
I don't know. Let's try that trail over there now that we've made the stairs.
Oh, okay.
Let's go.
Montreal by night. It's Olympic Stadium. Linda Russell.
Hi, now this is one of the two towers. There's one over there. And we were built in 1695.
Just get an idea of the size. the building.
Anyways, you will notice the classical type of architecture of that building, the columns. It looks like a Roman temple or a Greek temple. Well, it symbolizes the permanent efficiency of the Bank of Montreal. That is the oldest bank in Canada. It was established in 1817, has been here ever since. For new people in the United States, there's a very well-known person who has opened up a bank account in this Bank of Montreal. His name was John Wilkes Booth. And he did that just 2 weeks before he killed President Lincoln. Anyways, the Bank of Montreal has always been the symbol to become same design, same type of building.
Louise?
So we're getting here at the beginning of the 20th century.
I'm Sophie.
And how about the second
It's
half
Chris,
of the 20th
right back.
century? And you've got this modern high-rise building. You've got the whole history of Montreal. And this is something very typical of this. You see that diversity all over the place, even in the downtown Montreal and so forth. Okay, so I'd like to introduce you to Jeanne Mance. Jeanne Mance is the only woman who came with the first settlers. Poor thing. Made like a you. And if you don't believe me, I have
This building built in 1685.
fireplace that used to be at the end of this third wing that had to be demolished.
Look at it. Up there. Yeah. I don't think so. So did you guys drive up from Dallas or did you fly? Okay.
I flew.
Now used as an English-speaking flag theater in Toronto. The only English-speaking permanent troops we have.
This was the Canadian Stock Exchange until recently.
Watch out for this.
The two statues on the base of the pulpit represent two prophets, Ezekiel and Jeremiah. Ezekiel and Jeremiah. And you know that usually pulpits are located in front of the church so that everybody can face the priest when he's preaching. The reason why this one is in the central position is because when they built Notre Dame, there were no microphones to amplify the voice, and the church is quite large. So the preacher had to be placed in the center of the church in order to be heard by everyone. Now that we have microphones, the pulpit is never used. We stopped using it about 20 years ago, and now we use the microphone in front. And speaking of the front, the best example of wood carving I can give you is certainly the main altar. The whole structure and decorations were hand carved. The wood mostly used is red pine. The white statues and central niches were made out of white pine by a Frenchman named Henri Bourricher. The general theme of the main altar is the sacrifice. So each statue around the crucifixion represents a scene of sacrifice taken from the Bible. For example, if you look at the sculpture right in front of us, you can see a man standing up and a young man lying down at his feet.
Hudson Bay Company owned this, one of the first fur traders in Canada.
Okay, well, I'll give you a higher salary then. And you will be in charge of the canoe Silver Dome. What does this building remind you of? Architecture. What's that? Yes, you've got it. Yes. Repeat it. And you were right. The State House, or the Capitol building, it was designed by an American architect. And of course, his inspiration came from New England.
What is it doing here?
And you see the dome, that was the first dome. This is called the Bon Secours Market. It was used both as an indoor market and a sort of community center. The city chambers were first located there before the city hall was built. And it is typical of colonial New England type of design. But look at the size of this building, going from the church over there right to here. That must have been pretty impressive when the visitors arrived here by ship and could see this building. And that was a sort of welcoming building to all the visitors.
1905.
Chapel and the residence of the Jesuit priest.
I mean, 1705.
Coming back to the house, Mr. Ramsey built this quite big because he had a family of 16 children and one wife. I think that is enormous. So I'd like to ask you, this is typical again of French type of houses, fieldstone and so forth. What are the essence?
Linda Russell. Hello. Just gonna ignore me, huh?
I'm going to ignore you. Supposed to take pictures of everything else.
Yeah, it can't be all of your wife.
What we really need is you following me?
Just get where we're going. Well, they're my daughter. Thank you. I'm losing it. No, it's like...
Alors, voilà, c'est un premier groupe d'environ une cinquantaine de personnes. Alors, les premiers 50 Monty ou à peu près, madame là sur le provo, oui.
Va me cacher?
Non, ça peut aller. Vous êtes près d'un Monty.
J'ai beaucoup de mérite, hein, vous savez, avoir un dirait Monty aussi, malgré que ça vient gentil.
Ah, OK. Je pensais pas que ça allait faire éclater tout ça aujourd'hui aussi. Mais vous allez avoir des nouvelles, vous allez apprendre des choses sur les Monty.
Being separated.
Wisconsin.
Texas.
Texas.
Kansas. Oklahoma.
Missouri.
I bet Jean didn't know he was going to have them all over the place like that. Welcome. I think you guys have been in the area for the weekend. I guess your return is tomorrow, probably? Something like that. Okay. My goodness, and you even changed the spelling, too.
You betcha.
Oh, my. Well, it's easier that way, I suppose. What I'd like to do with you this morning is basically I'd like to present to you a little bit about the history of the fort. And then after that, you'll be able to go through the museum on your own. And I believe there's Paul Monty who will be getting dressed in a couple of minutes. And there'll be a uniform demonstration. And the uniform demonstration will be held probably in the corner over there or in the courtyard on this side here. So there will be a call on the intercom telling you when the uniform demonstration will start. Okay. So, since you guys have all come here to talk about, do the family reunion about Jean Monty, you guys should be able to tell me everything about this place. Right? Right?
Wrong.
Oh, well.
That's why we're here.
Darn.
Stay home.
Okay, well, basically what we have to do is we have to back up in time. We have to find ourselves in a period of approximately 1665. So for about 40, 50 years, the colony of New France has been starting to establish itself along the St. Lawrence River in the St. Lawrence River Valley, starting to have the Great Lakes. And in that establishment, of course, we have the beginnings of a conflict in 1609 between Samuel de Chambly and the Iroquois nations to the south. And so for that period of 40, 50 years, the colony is basically left to itself in terms of development and also in terms of defense. And it's only when King Louis XIV takes over in the tender ages of his late teens and early 20s that he decides that something has to be done about the colony. And what he will do in 1665 is he decides that that's it with the Iroquois, we're going to have to do something. And he sends over the Carignan-Salière regiments to build a series of forts along the Richelieu, because the Richelieu River had been always considered to be a traditional invasion route by the Iroquois. And what he will do is he will start at the mouth of the Richelieu at Sorel and build a series of 5 forts all the way up to Lake Champlain. And what those forts will do is they won't really serve as defense. What they will most likely serve as is sort of an offensive point, so where they can gather men and supplies to send them south. And so at Chambly here, we'll build a fort in 1665. It will be a wooden palisade. And on the site, we'll have a succession of 3 wooden forts. So we have the first in 1665, the second in 1690, and the third in 1702. And the third of 1702, you can basically see it behind you in that trace of wooden logs in the ground. Now, of course, that's not the Richelieu. That's the traces that we found during our archaeological digs. That fort will be replaced in 1709. He arrived, so Jean Monty still isn't terribly worried about forts and all that. And in 1709, what we do is we build the stone fort. And the reason for that is very simple. It's because we have a new enemy that's coming up the Richelieu River. And that will be the British. So, in garrison already at the fort, we have soldiers of the Compagnie Franche de la Marine. And the soldiers of the Compagnie Franche de la Marine were here from 1685 onwards. And these soldiers, the Compagnie Franche de la Marine, of course, was the military force to which Jean Monty belonged. The British, in coming up the Richelieu River, would start out typically at Boston or New York City, would sail up the Hudson River, portage over to Lake George, go up Lake George, portage over to the foot of Lake Champlain, sail up Lake Champlain, and down the Richelieu. So the fort, when it's built in 1709, is built to resist 4-pound artillery. 4-pound artillery fires cannonballs that are about the size of a tennis ball. It's not something very, very big, but within the realities of having to travel through swamps and forests and all that, that's essentially the biggest caliber that the British are able to carry. Because a tube that's required to fire that 4-pound ball can weigh anywhere between 800 and 1,200 pounds. So that's a lot of foot slogging to be able to get through all that territory. So by the time Jean Monty shows up, there's one very important thing that's changed. We realize that the fort has certain weaknesses, that we have to modify things, and one of the things that Jean Monty would be using that his predecessors would not have would be, you can't see them very easily here, but on each corner of the fort where you have the fleur de lis at the top there, you saw them from the outside, you have the wooden cabanas on the corners that will be used for sentinel duty. And those are called bartisans. And those will be added. We'll bring a whole series of other modifications to white out embrasures, to raise this wall here, and so on and so forth. And 5 years after, or actually 10 years after Jean Monty arrives, what we have is a change in the strategies of the French. By 1735, what the French have realized is that Chambly is too close to Montreal. It's too close, and by the time the British enemy arrives here, that means that it's too late, because they can easily get to Montreal. So what they will do is they will push the border to the south. And in the early 1730s, what they build is Fort Saint-Frédéric, which some people might know as Crown Point. And in the 7 Years' War, in the 1750s, they will go a little bit further south to protect the portage road between Lake George and Lake Champlain, and they'll build Fort Ticonderoga. At that point, at that period, it was known as Fort Carillon. So with that, the importance of the fortification here at Chambly diminishes, not because they really want to, but simply because they don't have enough men and they don't have enough supplies to keep every single fortification up to garrison strength. And so with that, Chambly will play a role essentially as a supplier to the forts to the south. And during the 7 Years' War, when the British do finally attack, what we'll find is that the fort cannot resist because it doesn't have an artillery. It has about 30 to 50 men inside. And on top of that, the artillery that the British are able to carry is much larger. And therefore, walls that are built of masonry like that have much difficulty being able to resist the impact of a cannonball. So the fort will give itself up, the British will take over, and the British will occupy Chambly until 1775. What happens in 1775?
American Revolution.
American Revolution. So we have Schuyler, we have Montgomery coming up here, and Montgomery will send up 100 or so men up to Chambly in September 1775. They will take Fort Chambly also, and they will hold on to the fort for about 9 months. They would push back down south by John Burgoyne in the spring of 76. The British take back over possession of the fort here, and they get to Saratoga where it flops, I think, eh? 1777 flops in Saratoga. And so what we find is that from then on, we won't really have any military conflicts on the site here. What we do have instead is that we change the vocation of the site. So during the War of 1812, to be able to defend the border between Canada and the US, what you do is instead of hiding behind the walls of the fort, we build one of the first military bases in Canada. We build a great big military complex, and in the summer of 1814, with the raid of Plattsburgh coming up, we'll have up to 6,000 men on the grounds here. And that'll be fairly important because the village that's around it, there will be about 100 to 200 French-Canadian households who are faced with 6,000 British soldiers. So you can imagine the sociological impact of having all these Brits land in on the place. After that, the fort will eventually be abandoned. It's abandoned in 1851. It lies vacant for 30 years. And in the summer of 1882, Joseph Octave Dion comes along and he installs himself in the part between the open door on your right and the open door right in the corner over there. He rebuilds his house because by that time you can see in the masonry all the way around that there's a line there. And essentially that line represents what was left of the fort by the time Joseph Octave comes along in the 1880s. What that means is that essentially by that time only the three exterior walls were still standing because of abandonment of hurricanes and so on and so forth. And it's thanks to Dion, thanks to his actions that the fort is saved, and it's thanks to his actions that Parks Canada was able to restore the site basically 10 years ago. And so what you have now is a representation of the fort as it was in 1750. So was Jean Monty still around in 1750?
Yes, he died in 1755.
He died in 55? Yeah, what about there? So this would be the way the fort was in 1750 when Jean Monty might still have been in garrison of the fort. Would you have any questions on this?
Is this all done? I see the diggings over here. Is this part of the archaeological dig?
Yeah. And the cement traces that you have in the courtyard here, those are also part of that. When we did the digs in 1976, 77, 78, we did basically the courtyard, and we did all the inside.
In the 1600s, how big was the surrounding accompaniment to the fort? I mean, was the town beginning to grow on the exterior of the fort at that time? Traders and what have you, did they live in the vicinity? Have you done digs out there?
That's a good question. In 1665, when the Carignan-Salière regiment arrives here, and basically arrives all along the Richelieu, they're the first Europeans to set up anything permanent on the Richelieu River. There's virtually nothing European on the river prior to that. So they arrive here, and their job is to be able to cut down some wood, some trees in the area, and build their fort. So they're really out in the boom, and they're pretty scared. What happens though is that with the presence of the Carignan-Salière, there's a sort of an attempt at peace with the Iroquois that's signed. And in 1672, we decided the conflict is okay, that things are pretty peaceful, and we send part of the Carignan-Salière home, and the other part, out of the 50 men approximately, there will be some 400 that will stay. And the officers will be granted seigneuries, and they will grant farms to their men. Okay? And here at Chambly, it was Captain Jacques de Chambly who was awarded the seigneury around the basin. Okay? And in 1672, he grants the farms around the basin. And you'll see up on the second floor in the seigneurial section, you'll see a little bit more about who was granted what on the basin. Okay.
Were the Indian officers there?
This is a no man's land.
You have a nice day. Enjoy your visit. You have a supper tonight or something, or was it last night? No. All the activities are today?
something.
The creek. The only Monties we knew were the Ohio Monties.
Not in Illinois, though.
No, they were evidently
But it was his son. Clovis.
1760 King of England. But his ministers are uneasy. Who do we blame for the loss of Canada? Paris, 1763. The Canada affair. Those who have served under the King in Canada are summoned before the court. Rigaud de Vaudreuil, Governor General of New France, Knight of the Great Cross of Saint Louis, and behind him, the commanders and storekeepers of the forts on the Richelieu, the St. Lawrence, and the Ohio, de Bois-Hébert, de Noyant, de Vassan, de l'Épervenche, de Sac-Esprit, d'Artigny, de Rouville, commander of the fort in Chambly, and besides the military men and public servants, François Bigot, intendant of justice, the marine and finances of New France, Jean-Victor Varin, his delegate at Montreal, Guillaume Estève, the king's storekeeper at Quebec, Joseph Cadet, the king's munitions supply officer in Canada, Michel Jean-Hugues Péan, major of the marine troop at Quebec.
Okay, good. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at specifically what Jean Monty might have looked like when he was in garrison here at the fort. Jean Monty and any other soldier of the Compagnie Franche de la Marine would, for 98% of the time, would be from France. We have very, very, very few people in the Compagnie Franche de la Marine who come from the colony itself. One of the reasons for that is that any man between the ages of 16 and 60 is already serving in the militia. And he's doing it for free, and we don't have to clothe him, we don't have to feed him or anything like that, so it's an awful lot cheaper to leave the men in the colony in the militia. So 98% of the soldiers of the Compagnie Franche come from France. They would typically be in the age bracket of between 16 and 30. To be recruited, they would have to meet the age requirement of a minimum of 16. They would have to be 5'1" in French inches and feet, which would be about 5'5" for us today. They would have to be in good health, and they would have to be male. So this guy is at least 16. Yeah. You're at least 5'1". you're in good health, and you're male, right? Okay. So, with the 4 basic requirements, a soldier in the Compagnie Franche would receive 2 weeks of training. And with that, he's supposed to know how a soldier is supposed to conduct himself in whatever kind of situation. And after the 2 weeks, he's sent to one of the colonies. And by the time Jean Monty comes along, he actually has the luck of knowing where he's going. Because prior to that, any soldier of the Compagnie Franche would basically put him in a boat, and off he goes. And he doesn't know where the boat is going. So he could show up in the West Indies, he could show up on Cape Breton Island, he could show up in Louisiana, or he could show up in New France in the St. Lawrence River Valley. So as you know, Jean Monty arrived in the St. Lawrence River Valley. He arrives at Quebec City. He joins his company, and it's only at that point that he receives his uniform. And what we have with Paul Monty here is we have the basic outfit of what he would be wearing when he receives his uniform. It differs very, very little from what he would be wearing as civilian clothing. Because up until the 19th century, the distinction between a soldier and a civilian is very, very slight. So he would be wearing a pair of socks that would go all the way up to the knee. He would be wearing a pair of breeches, and the breeches are just a little bit too long in this case. They should go just below the knee. And he's wearing his shirt. He's too short. So what we find with this outfit is that the shirt here, if we were to ask him to take his breeches off, which we won't, his shirt would typically go all the way down to the knees also. One of the reasons for that is that it's the fashion of the period, and the other reason is that very, very simply, we wear the shirt as a nightshirt at the same time. So we receive 2 shirts per year, and we're expected to wear them basically 24 hours a day for 6 months. Yeah. Because along with that, our soldier is requested to wash his hands and his face every day. He's asked to shave 2 to 3 times per week, and everything that's above the wrists and below the neck is left to his discretion. So that means that he doesn't jump in to the bath very, very often. He jumps in probably once or twice a year, simply because those are the habits of the period. One of the things being is that they thought that if you didn't wash very often, if you accumulated grunge, is that it would basically, it would make you a stronger person, or it would make you be able to resist sickness and disease much more easily. So, our soldier doesn't wash too often. He has on his basic outfit, and to this we will add a whole series of elements. Just to make sure that the soldier doesn't get any, do you want him to be on his time off or at work? Work? Okay. When he's at work, when he's doing his guard duty and so on, he would be wearing a pair of straight-laced shoes like these. So the expression, 1-2 buckle my shoe and all that stuff comes from these things here. Okay? The shoes are straight-laced, not for any particular reason or fashion, but more for the reason that the shoemaker considers it to be a lot more handy to have just one form to make a shoe on instead of having lefts and rights for all the different sizes.
Not boots, but shoes.
Shoes. Yeah. And you can see right there, there's already a great big problem. Because if you look at shoes like that, and you start thinking about a soldier having to run around in snow and in mud and so on and so forth, he's not very well protected. If the soldier was at rest, he would be wearing a pair of wooden clogs like these. And these things end up being very practical because they're very resistant. They don't fall apart. And They're also made out of something that's in very, very good supply around here. And what we find with our civilian population is that typically, if you wear a pair of shoes, you would wear them probably on Sundays or some other fancy day like that. And when you're doing work in the fields and so on, you wear moccasins. And if your weather is a little bit damp or so on, then what you would do is you would put on a pair of clogs, and that would keep your moccasins wet. The shoes are straight-laced, so they don't have any slides. So, we would also have the tie, and this thing is great because you don't have to worry about Windsors or half Windsors or anything. And if the soldier is a little bit more dressed up, then he would do his tie like so. Okay? Nothing too terribly complicated. And we would also ask him to wear this thing. What is it?
Monty money belt.
Are you sure that the family is still going to want to have you around at the end of the day?
40 years.
No, he's already got his tie.
Headband.
No Rambos. Okay, well, you weren't too bad when you were going around like that. The fashion of that period is for men to wear their hair long. Okay? And so what they would do is their hair would be worn in a ponytail at the back. And what you would do with your ponytail is you would put it into this little pouch here. And in French, this is called a bourse à cheveux, or translated quite literally, a hair purse. And so you would put the ponytail into the pouch, and you would tie it up at the back, and then you would turn around, a little bit more. You would basically have your hair purse hanging down like that at the very back. If you go up on the second floor, you'll notice the soldiers up there are wearing their hair purse, and you'll also notice the officer that was outside with you this morning, he's also wearing his hair purse on his wig. So that's one of the fashions of the period.
History is repeating itself today.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed. Over all of this, we would have the waistcoat. And the waistcoat that I have just put on here is a waistcoat from 1750. How can you tell that? Very easy. You have the number of buttons on the front. If I were to give our soldiers the waistcoat that Jean would have received on his arrival in 1725, he would have a waistcoat with buttons from top to bottom. Okay? And just like we have fashion things today, you have fashion things back then. So the fashion in 1725 is to wear lots of buttons. The fashion in 1750 is to wear fewer buttons. Over the waistcoat, our soldier would also be called to wear, on top of this here, the juste au cas. And the reason why we call it a juste au cas is very basically that it fits right to the body. Juste au cas. And with the juste au cas here, we also have other fashion statements in that in 1750 the fashion is to tie your pleats up on the side. With this also, what we find is about one of the only concessions for cold weather. And the cold weather protection system is basically your cuffs that are lowered over the hand. like that. Okay, so they keep your hands. Now, if we were to look, if we were to look at the difference between a soldier and his officers, we would find that essentially the uniform does not change very much. What we would find instead of having lots of braids and so on and so forth is that we would have a uniform that would be made of finer quality material, and we would also find more material. So what that means is that this is another ordinary soldier's justaucar, is that the uniform is of finer quality, and to prove the wealth of the soldier, of the officer, he has more material in the outfit. And so instead of having 3 or 4 pleats at the back here, he would have 5, 6, or 7 braids. And that's the way that he would be able to distinguish himself from the soldiers. The soldier also has the cocked hat, worn like so. And as soon as the soldier puts on his belt, it's at that point that we start being able to figure out the difference between a civilian and a soldier. Because if you were to go down the streets of Montreal, you would find somebody who's fairly well-to-do would be wearing, as I said earlier, basically the same thing. So the belt is worn around the waist, and on the belt, of course, we have the cartridge box, which would be used for the cartridges for the musket. And on the cartridge box, we have an anchor, and that's what represents the Compagnie Franche de la Marine. If you were to translate Compagnie Franche de la Marine, it would very simply mean independent companies of the Marine, because it was the Minister of the Marine that paid these soldiers. So we have, for our soldier, also on his belt, we have, his bayonet, as well as a wonderful little decoration. We have a sword. And for a soldier, that's a real privilege to be able to wear this, because in theory, it's only the aristocracy that's allowed to wear a sword. So it's a privilege for him, except that it ends up being a real problem. This thing is really, really, really impractical. If you're wandering around in the woods of North America, let me get this on the right side here. If you're wandering around in the woods of North America, and you have this stupid thing with you, first of all, when you try walking, it gets caught in your legs. So you have to start carrying your musket in one hand, and you have to keep your sword up on your side like that, just so it doesn't get caught. And then the other thing is that if you're wandering around in the brush and the woods and all that, it gets caught up everywhere. So what your soldier would do instead of carrying this thing along is that he would dump it, and he would bring himself an axe or something like that, which is much more practical when you're in the woods, because one of the things you can do with it is cut wood to be able to make your fire, to make your supper. So this would be used essentially only in parade purposes. Goes on the side like so. And the principal thing that our soldier would be wearing, using at that point in terms of weapons, would be the flintlock musket. And the way this thing is worked is quite simple. And what I'll do is I'll show you the series of orders that Jean would have had to learn in his 2 weeks of training, and that he would have had to practice every week or so. So, cartridge. So the soldiers would be standing in line with their musket on their left shoulder, and we would give this next series of commands. Portez le fusil sur la main gauche. So bring it around onto the left hand, like so. And I'll just turn around so you can see a little bit better. Mettez le chien au repos. Prenez la cartouche. Take the cartridge. Déchirez la cartouche entre les dents. Tear the cartridge. Amorcez le fusil. And so what happens at that point is that you pour a little bit of the black powder that's in the cartridge into the pan here. I'm sorry, sir, we're not allowed to smoke. So we prime the musket, and then we have, after that, fermer le bassinet, porter le fusil du côté de l'épée. So we bring it around onto the left side, like so. Charger le fusil, we pour the rest of the black powder and the lead ball that's in the cartridge and the paper down the barrel. Just to give you what the idea the cartridge looks like, essentially it's something like that. Okay? So what you do is you end up with the charge like so down at the bottom of the barrel. After that, you have to tirer la baguette, raccourcissez la baguette, mettez la baguette dans le canon. Bourrez, tirez la baguette, raccourcissez la baguette, remettez la baguette en son lieu. Portez le fusil, haut le fusil, apprêtez le fusil, en joue, feu. And what happens at that point is that the sparks that you might have seen here, my flint is getting a little bit worn out. We'll do it again just in case. The sparks that you see, okay, those sparks fall into the pan that's full of powder. And the sparks, of course, light the powder, and that makes a flame, and the flame will cross through the barrel into the bottom of the barrel here, light the charge inside, and the ball goes off. Boom. Okay? That's if you're lucky. Because 1 time in 6, the musket misfires. And that can be for a variety of reasons. So here you are, standing in pretty little rows, getting shot at, and your musket doesn't go off. So you got to go through the maintenance check. And what you have to figure out is why the musket does not go off. One of the things is that your flint often has to be readjusted. You have to nap it, you have to chip away at it so it gives a nice edge on it again. Or the flint can be dirty, or the frizzen can be dirty, or the pan can be dirty, the vent can be blocked, you don't have enough powder, there's too much wind, it's too damp, etc., 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 etc. Okay? So you get some real problems on your hands when this thing doesn't go off. And if it really doesn't go off, and you have the problem of having the charge go off in the pan here, but you don't have the charge go off in the barrel, then you have what we call a hang fire. And then you got to start waiting around for this thing to see what's going to happen. Because one of the things that can come along is that one teeny tiny little ember can still be burning and can sort of at some point come along and go through the vent and go over there and eventually set the charge off inside. And that can be anywhere from 30 seconds to 20 minutes later. So you have to be really careful with this. The other problem that comes along is that with your cartridge box here is that you have 9 cartridges. You can load and fire this thing 3 times a minute. So after 3 minutes, you don't have anything left. So what do you do? Well, the Army, of course, thinks of everything. And what they will provide you with is a powder horn like this one. And then what you have to do is you have to start your whole rigmarole over again. And what you have to do is you have to take the powder horn, you have to open up the little clasp on the side. That lets the powder fall into the little funnel part here. You have to close that. Then you have to come around here and you have to prime. You have to close that, and you have to come around and load the thing. And you would also have, in reserve, you would have lead balls like this one that you would take out of your cartridge box, and you would put that down the barrel, you would ram, and you keep on. The other thing that you have to worry about also is at some point you would have the bayonet. And when people take a look at their cameras and they have, you have a Pentax, right? No, who has the Pentax here? I saw somebody have a Pentax. Or there it is. Is yours a screw on or is it bayonet mount? Screw on. Screw on, eh? Okay? So, on some cameras, except for Pentax, I have to get stuck with the Pentax to talk about this. When you talk about a bayonet mount lens, it comes from this system right here. And this system was developed from the problem that the original bayonets that you had were plug bayonets, and basically they would fit into the barrel. And that wasn't very practical because you couldn't fire in, or you would lose your bayonet. So eventually we developed this system, which is much more efficient, and derivatives of it are still used today. So, with that, I have the pleasure So with this, I have the pleasure of introducing to you a family member, Mr. Paul Monty, as a soldier of the Compagnie Franche de la Marine. A big round for our soldier, please.
All right.
Would you have any questions on anything? Yeah.
I was wondering how was the gun in the 1700s? Had it been invented before?
When I talked about the Carignan Salière regiments arriving here in 1665, they already have this type of musket. Previous to that, it had been the matchlock. And so this is the musket that most of the armies in the world will use up until the 1850s. So it's a fairly long-lasting design.
And they push it down and they shoot. And that's the gunpowder. Everything has to be hard that they Everything has to be hard. Hi again. Everything has to be hard. How they eat here, window. Yeah, they close it up. How they eat corn or apples. Some of the birds they shoot down to eat. They can't take it. This is somebody doing their hair. The quarters. How big the quarters?
Sorry, but I'm related to well, yes, and I'm a roux, which is the French part, so I probably have some.
A long time ago, 19.
This is amazing.
It is.
Neither. Hi, Chuck.
Hi, Betty.
How are you?
Great. How you
Good.
doing?
I'm glad you came.
Introduce your
Grandson.
here for my children.
I'll even turn around the sign.
Oh, okay. To who? To who?
To our children in
yeah,
Dallas.
All right. This is my grandson, Christopher, my son's oldest son.
And this is her sister. Right?
How you doing, Rusty?
This is my cousin.
Your cousin.
So first cousin. Her mother and my mother were sisters.
My son.
In Chambly and see how our region is rich in human people. Have a nice day and have a nice stay in our region.
Thank you.
On connaît le chemin pour se rendre là-bas.
Non.
Parce que nous avons des plans à l'arrière pour vous remettre et vous pouvez demander aux gens si vous voulez vous approcher de vos voitures pour partir. If you want to go near your car, and we'll leave here and we'll go to the farm, to the land of the Monty.
That's okay.
Je suis une petite Monty. I'm a small Monty, so I think you can.
A little bit soft. Don't see any cow.
Celui qui avait un...
And if you want a beer, it's $2, and the soft drinks are free.
This is the Monty home in Chambly, Quebec.
Yeah,
You let you get send it in? Yeah.
Everybody happy? Yeah.
That we have over 225 people who have come. Introduce to you the people who have done all of the hard work, the members of the committee, Monsieur Albert Monty of Chambly. Albert. Mrs. Louise Monty of Chambly. Mr. Laurent Monty of Chambly. Mrs. Claudette Monty of Chambly. Mr. Claude Monty of Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. And we'd like to give special thanks to Ms. Jocelyn and Jacques Monty, who have been so kind to be hosts to have us here on their home. You are presently on the property of Jacques Monty. He is the direct descendant of Antoine, 8th generation, the son of Jean Monty. The house built on this land is 150 years old and is owned since 1978 by Jocelyn Le Cavalier and Jacques Monty. I tried. by the present owners with a lot of work and taste. The centennial woodwork has been the witness of many lifestyles and family gatherings. To your right, you see the house of Albert Monty, the uncle of Jacques Monty. It was built in the 30s. It's a square-style house with 4-side roof. This house replaces the ancestral home built on this land, which was Chambly domain or seigneurie, given by Lord Jean-Baptiste Boucher de Niverville to Jacques Poyer, Lapidade, the father of Mary Martha Poyer, wife of Jean Monty. Jacques Monty sold this land to his son-in-law, Jean Monty, on February 15, 1732, for a price of about £600. We are extremely happy to welcome you to this ancestral time for the first meeting of the Montys of North America. After we have the meal in the garage, there are a lot of genealogical things we can look at, different documents, and also a video that I'm sure you folks would love to see. Have a great meal.
They're working? The green line? Okay, sit back so that you don't bounce off. There. Around the bridge. Oh, I'm getting this one. This comes on the bridge.
This is Chambly Bridge.
Just had construction on this. So that might slow us down a bit. USA is that way.
Not too much traffic on Labor Day.
Montreal, Canada. Oh, you can see good. You've got pictures of the buildings. Submit it since you have something against it.
Oh, bumpy.
There's a city up here. We got the pillar in the way. We'll get it when we get up on the bridge. You'll have one. They got the side on this time. Across this bridge.
I go over the water.
Guys, you sure missed a good trip over here in Canada. We had a good time.
You notice every once in a while, like a little bump in the road. Bump.
We got a plasma size now, a little bit less.
Gas. This is not going to make for a very good view here. Out there.
Over here, look out the side. Yeah, you can see the city from there.
Well, not really. The city's really a picture here. This is old Montreal next to the Lake Champlain. In the background, you see
bridges.
Don't need it. Don't need it.
Overcast skies.
Right through there. Right through there. Do that. You gotta lean up. Go straight down that river. Get over top of the rail. Get over top of the rail.
Nope.
Don't take a picture of the rail.
No, well, we got part of the picture beyond the rail base.
Oh, Nuns Island. We don't want to go Nuns Island. It's a big bridge, folks.
Long bridge. Like a squirrel eating a peanut.
Exit. I guess I don't have to exit. We got on the island. Oh, that's where I want to go.
Something like downtown Montreal. Just went that way.
It's okay. Hey, turn on this. Can't see. Just like that. Rolling into Montreal. What, one of Venture Street? Turns into University. Which is our destination this morning. This noon. There's how you go to Notre Dame. Notre Dame. There's part of that ship and stuff. It's it must be old Montreal Road. You just watch straight out the windshield, you'll get the turn. This is a holiday in Montreal. It's Labor Day, same as U.S. more the Olympic complex. This is the, what do they call it? The athletes' housing. This one over there.
Les passagers dans les ciels dans les rangées 20 à 33 de Modène.
Hey, what's up?